Over 100 million people worldwide tune into the Super Bowl each year. Because of the high viewership, companies typically put out their best advertising at this event, and this year I got to participate as I edited a regional Super Bowl commercial. Today I'd like to invite you into my edit suite so I can share the art and the science behind cutting this spot. Let's take a look so we can dive in.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough? By myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
Get your money working with amazing certificate rates now at americafirst.com.
We'll start with the art of editing, and then we'll get into some of the science. No matter what project I'm working on, I use the same 5 editing criteria, and they are, in order of importance, emotion, story, rhythm, sound, and action. When I say emotion, I'm not talking about the emotion of the characters in the scene, although that's good to keep in mind too. But what I'm referring to is the emotion of the audience. As editors, we should always be editing with the audience in mind. When I was cutting this commercial, my target emotion for the beginning of the spot was anxiety. And I think that comes through whether you relate to the timid parents or the angsty teenager in the form of a $5 bill. And by the end of the spot, I wanted there to be an emotion of delight, or perhaps at least a release of tension in the audience. Now the story. It's rare to have all of the elements of a classical 3-act story structure packed into a 30-second commercial, but even on short projects, you do usually have some of them, and it's important to highlight those story beats so you can take your audience on a journey. In this commercial, I'd say we have the first element, which is normalcy, also called the ordinary world, and that's the $5 bill sitting on his bed on his phone. And then we have an inciting incident. The parents have come into his room and interrupted the normal world. And then we have rising tension, which leads to a sort of climax when the $5 bill throws a tantrum and stands up on the bed. And finally, we have a sort of resolution by the end of the spot. That's a lot packed into 30 seconds. Next is rhythm. Sometimes it's best for the rhythm of a scene to remain invisible, and for a dialogue-driven commercial like this, I thought that was best. I created a nice steady tempo without any dramatic rhythmic contrast, and you'll see in my timeline, it's just a nice steady rhythm taking us through the spot. Now sound. An important part of any soundtrack is the music, and as an editor, I have 2 main ways to incorporate music. One is known as diegetic music, and that means the music is actually being created in or coming from within the scene itself. If you've watched a movie and a character is driving in the car and there's music playing on the car radio, that would be known as diegetic music. And then there's non-diegetic music, which we're all familiar with, like a musical score that is not necessarily coming from the world of the film. In this commercial, we have both. Throughout the first half of the commercial, I used diegetic music, a hard rock song that appears to be emanating from the $5 bill's headphones. And I thought this really helped add to my target emotion of anxiety. And at the end of the spot, we have non-diegetic music, which is the jingle that plays under the end art card. By using the diegetic music in the spot, I was able to create a cool moment of contrast when the $5 bill takes out his headphone and the music stops. It really emphasizes that moment. Let's listen to that section.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough? By myself?
Rounding out the sound design are some nice bird noises. As you can see, it's a nice bright sunny day outside. And then I worked on making the door knock and door open as irritating as possible to really add to that anxiety at the beginning. Let's listen to that soloed. I also added some details to accentuate the shot when the $5 bill takes out his earbud, throws down the phone, and stands up on the bed. Let's listen to that. My fifth and final editing criteria is action, or the in and out points of each shot. This commercial is a good illustration of how you can use J-cuts and L-cuts in a dialogue scene. Let's go shot by shot and discuss it. So how do I get from shot 1 to shot 2? Well, you'll notice you hear the knock at the door during shot 1, and then I cut in for the $5 bill to notice the knock.
Hey, bud.
To go from shot 2 to shot 3, you'll notice again we hear something off screen. And in this case, it's the dialogue of the dad. And this is known as a J cut because in the timeline, it makes a letter J. The cut is here, the audio starts here, so we have a J cut. You'll see this pattern a lot in this spot and a lot in movies, where you hear something and then see it.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
But then I break that pattern with a hard cut where we see the Bill's reaction to what the dad just said.
Doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
And then another J cut, but this time you hear the mom's entire line while we're looking at the bill, and that leads us into the dad's next line.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh?
And then we have another J cut where we hear the beginning of the Bill's next line.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough by myself?
And then instead of staying on the Bill during his whole speech, we take a moment to cut to the parents' reaction.
By myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
And then we're back to the Bill for the end of his speech, but we've moved into a nice medium shot.
Love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
Then we cut back to the dad, we have a short comedic beat, and he answers. And the mom's line begins, and that motivates the cutout to both the parents where the mom finishes her line.
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
And finally, the end music comes in, and we cut to the art card. I want to say one more thing about J-cuts. They're often talked about as a way to smooth out a transition from one shot to the next, and they certainly do that. But there's something more important happening, in my opinion, and that's the power of seeing a character's reaction to what they're hearing off screen. So be deliberate in that. Let's take a look again at this first J-cut.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
So it is helpful to hear the dad before we see the dad. But the key with this interaction is to hear the dad say, "Hey, bud," in sort of a loving, timid way, while we see the angsty teenager stone-faced. And that creates a certain kind of moment. And I think that's what you're looking for when you're working on J-cuts in your dialogue scenes. Now let's shift to the science of editing. This commercial had some really fun technical challenges, namely the main character was 3D animated. So I'm going to give you a tour of my timeline, and then I'll show you layer by layer how this spot came together from a technical perspective. This spot was shot on the Arri Alexa at 4K, so that's the size of the image, 23.98 frames per second, with a codec called Apple ProRes 4444. High-end cameras actually shoot a very flat-looking image to give you the most options later when doing your final color grade, but that's hard to look at during an offline edit, so I often apply a LUT to the footage. LUT stands for lookup table. Sometimes I'll apply a standard Rec 709 LUT, so it brings back a lot of the contrast to the image. But other times, the cinematographer will actually send me a custom LUT that they were also using on set. So when we're in the offline edit, we're actually looking at something very close to what we were looking at on set. And that was the case here. As I mentioned, my biggest challenge editing a spot like this was the fact that I had no main character. So what did I do? Well, you really have to focus on the audio performance of the character, and that's what I did here. Let's watch the spot as it probably looked during one of my early rough cuts with no main character.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough by myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
As we got closer to picture lock, we passed off the audio to the 3D animator, and he actually recorded an actor acting out the facial expressions to the recorded audio. Let's watch this again with the facial captures and some early animation tests placed in the edit. That's the second video layer here.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough by myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
It really starts to come to life when you add in even the facial capture performances. But the next level was when we got final animation from the 3D animator. Let's take a look at what that looks like. That's video layer 3.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough by myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
And finally, I passed the raw footage off to the colorist, and he sent back this beautiful color grade. Now, the key to delivering files to a 3D animator or a colorist is to give them the raw footage at the native size and frame rate that it was shot at, with all LUTs turned off. They want that flat image, so they have the most room to work with. And while I sent the raw files off to color, I sent my raw audio off to a sound mixer by way of an AAF file, which keeps everything on its own track in an uncompressed format so they can open it up in Pro Tools and pick up where I left off. Now that you've seen behind the curtain, let's watch the spot one more time with the final color, final 3D animation, and final sound mix.
Hey, bud. This doing nothing all day isn't good.
You should be out making friends.
Lots of friends.
Why? Huh? Because I'm not enough by myself? Because you would love me more if I was always bringing over new money friends?
Yes.
It's called earning dividends, dear.
Get your money working with amazing certificate rates now at americafirst.com.
If you got value out of this video, please subscribe, and you might want to check out my free editing guide, which you can download at the link in the description. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you should check out this video next. Happy editing.